So it's all to play for still.
I think so. Do you want to bet against us?
Hello, Aston Villa fans, and welcome to For the Love of Paul McGrath podcast. And we are going to have a different conversation. You guys are probably all sick of seeing my face with regards to transfers and transfers that may be happening into Aston Villa. And I said I needed a change of pace, and I wanted to talk about somebody who is ours already, but was loaned out. And it's somebody I think has gone very much under the radar. And certainly it's not somebody I'm going to talk about, because for all the great stuff that Newport County have done, I haven't seen an awful lot of their football this season. So I'd like to welcome the wonderful Ed from the 1912 Exiles Podcast and Newport Podcast to come and to talk to us about somebody that I think we can categorize as having a really successful loan spell with you guys over the course of this season.
Yeah, well, Prynawn da, good afternoon. Diolch am sgwrs, thanks for the chat. So Finn Azaz, I mean, he has been a revelation for us this season. By way of context, Finn Azaz was one of three lone central midfielders who we signed in the summer. All of them from bigger clubs, and all came with kind of good reputation, but we weren't quite sure how they would fit together. So we have Finn Azaz from Villa, Ollie Cooper from Swansea City, and Jake Kane from Liverpool. And as the season progressed, those three were the kind of fulcrum of our midfield, and we based our play around the skills and talents of those three, which I'll talk about. And really, the success that we had this season, in a season where we challenged for promotion and ended up just short, but it was due in no small part to what those three brought to the team. And I think if they had cemented themselves a little bit earlier, or if we'd realised their talents a little bit earlier and not persisted with some cloggers who were kind of getting in the way on the pecking order ahead of them earlier in the season, then we may even have made the playoffs or made the automatics. But those three were sensational, and we kept on the pod. We referred to them as our fizzy midfielders, because there was this kind of fizz that they brought to it, and energy and youthful dynamism. And sometimes that was characterized as, you know, they were very good and creative, but perhaps lacked a little bit of bite and a bit of steel, because they are maybe a bit younger and maybe not as physical as other players in the fourth division. But actually, I think as time went on, they showed that they can get involved with some of the rough stuff as well. Now, I will say, I think of the three of them, at his best, Finn Azaz is undoubtedly the most talented out of the three. He blew hot and cold at times, particularly at the start of the season. He'd have a few games where you go, God, this lad is mustard, and then he'd kind of disappear a little bit. Yeah. And Ollie Cooper,
for abilities of youth, I suppose, really, isn't it? Like,
exactly.
Learning big boy football, like.
Yeah, I mean, I think out of the three of them, Cooper is probably the one who was consistently the best, and the one I'd expect to see in the Wales setup at some point. But Azaz was and is a hell of a prospect. And we talked on the pod about how high we think the three will go. And I think there's definitely a consensus that Azaz will be playing second tier football probably next season. I'm not sure we were convinced he would walk into the Villa team in the top flight just yet, but he is definitely ready to make the step up now. You know, he had a spell at Cheltenham before us. He's had a whole season with Newport challenging, and I would imagine that he's more than capable now of making a step up. I mean, an exceptionally talented footballer, very able to hit a shot from distance and score the odd thunderbastard of a goal, but also someone who has that kind of metronome in midfield. You know, he can keep the ball moving, keep the ball passing. And he was a real pleasure to watch, a really good technical player.
Yeah, and I suppose that was, he got the plaudits not just from Newport County fans and the Newport County team, because he was named the League 2 Young Player of the Season. And realistically, a lot of Aston Villa fans, I'll be honest, I'll do this podcast and I'll pop this out on Twitter, and a lot of Aston Villa fans will go, Oh yeah, I forgot we signed him because he came in. It's like that Simpsons gif whereby Grandpa Simpsons comes in, takes off his hat,
Yeah.
turns around, puts on his hat, and walks back out again because he no sooner signed and the deal was already done to send him out on loan. And he was a different demographic that we signed as well because he was an older type player that was coming from West Brom's 23s. We have a very West Brom heavy academy now with regards to the guys we brought in at the top and the coaches that we have in there. And they obviously knew something about this guy that most people didn't. And they got him in. They said he's progressed really well. He's probably gone on a lot better at Cheltenham than we expected him to. And we want to send him out for maybe more games at that level again. So because we see there's a real prospect of this guy really growing quickly. He's played 79. He's played the bones of 80 games in League Two football at this stage, and like for somebody who's 21, will be 22 in September of this year. That's fantastic, and to have the League Two Young Player of the Season award under his belt as well is more good accolades for him. But as I say, a lot of Villa fans would have mostly been focused on the outgoings and loans this season of maybe Keenan Davis in the latter half of the year, Kane Kessler-Hayden's, Louis Barry, those type of players as well. And Finn Azaz, maybe he didn't have that name recognition, but he's gotten the recognition amongst his peers.
Yeah, and I think his is a career that will go from strength to strength. In fairness, I think the same is true of Kessler-Hayden, who we saw play against us for Swindon at the start of the season, and he bossed that game. And I think a lot of Newport fans, myself included, walked away and thought, that lad's going to go on and do stuff. So I would put him in the same category as someone who has very clearly demonstrated what they can do in the fourth division and will not be playing at that level again anytime soon. So, one of the few pleasures sometimes of watching football at this level is you catch glimpses of players on their way up. And then, you get to enjoy seeing them from afar on a television screen somewhere in the years ahead as their careers move on. And I suspect that, both Kessler-Hayden and Azaz will be playing at a higher level soon.
So, he scored 7 goals this season, and you mentioned Newport County came close to promotion or getting into the playoffs and so on. But I suppose what would have been his best attribute that you would have seen from him over the course of the season? You mentioned he blows hot and cold, but what would be
he certainly started off blowing hot and cold. He got much more consistent as the season developed, and I think by Christmas time he was showing himself to be much more consistent. And I think it's inevitable with young players out on their first or second loan spell that it does take them a little while to bed in, and so I don't think anyone held that against him at all. And once he started to play more consistently, he did chip in with some good goals, both in terms of quality and importance. And I'll perhaps talk about one or two of those in a minute. But I think for me, his best attribute was his speed of thought, and that's something that you really don't get often in the fourth division. That marks out the players who will go on and do extremely well from those who are going to be at that level for a while. And his ability to very quickly pick a pass, to control the ball and take on his man and not overthink it. It was probably the thing that we liked the most. He covered a lot of ground as well. I mean, all of those kind of fizzy midfielders did. They weren't just there to play attractive football. They were there to be very, very busy and chase players down, because although they weren't physically the strongest, because they closed players down very, very quickly, gave opponents no time on the ball, forced mistakes. That's how we were then able to win the ball back. And then Azaz and the other central midfielders would then get on the front foot straight away and either attack into the opposition third, or they'd play the pass into the strikers. And so, he was critical in that. He wasn't, he's a tall lad, but he's not physically the biggest, strongest. But the energy he has to close players down was, extremely impressive. And then in terms of the goals that he was able to get, I mean, there were a few real contenders. The one that I liked the most that he scored for us, that perhaps technically wasn't his best, but I think showed all of his best attributes. We went away to Swindon in April in a game we had to win to stay in the promotion hunt. And Azaz got the ball out wide, didn't look on really. He didn't look as though he had anywhere to go, but he beat a player, cut inside, got past the goalkeeper, and then from an angle that was almost literally impossible. I mean, we were very close to being in line with it, and you thought, well, there's no way he's going to score there. He's either going to have to pull it back to one of the onrushing players from midfield, or he's going to have to, find a way to get himself into a scoreable position. But very calmly, he looked up, got his bearings, and scored by basically kicking it in off the defender who was running back. And to have the calmness and the brain to realise that was the sensible move was that told you everything about Finn Azaz. He had the speed to get into that position, the quality to get his head up, and then the intelligence to play it in off the defender. And then he celebrated right in front of me and my youngest. It was his first away game. And it was just a great moment. So it had everything, that goal. And we won that game 1-0. And for a week at least, thought we were back in the promotion hunt until we went and stuffed it up the following Friday. But so that for me was Finn Azaz's best moment, or my favourite moment of his in a county shirt, and showed all of his attributes.
Excellent. It's not often that you hear that. His best attribute is kicking it off defenders, but that's where context is king. And look, as I say, it's one of those moments, I suppose, that will stand out for you for sure, because he did display a lot of good efforts, I suppose, in the build up to it. Can I ask a question as well with regards to? So, am I right in saying that? Was it this season or last season that Michael Flynn left at the start?
So it was early this season. Yeah. So last season, Flinny took us to the playoff final, and we lost to Morecambe after a pretty dreadful game. And I think it hit us really hard, and there was a bit of a hangover into the start of this season. There were rumours that Flynn had basically handed in his notice after the Morecambe game and decided, rightly or wrongly, that he'd sort of taken this team as far as they could go and that he needed a new challenge. And surprise, surprise, kind of 3 months to the day from when people were saying he's handed his notice in, he left the club. And so that seems to have been what happened. And he went and took on the job at Walsall, and has done very well there. And he left with the best wishes, I think, of county fans. And I think we felt, maybe it was just one of those things that, sometimes someone can be around a workplace or a football club for too long. And maybe it was in both parties' interest for him to move on. Certainly, I have no doubt he will go on and do very, very well with Walsall. And for us, James Rowberry, who had been a coach at Cardiff City, but also done an awful lot within the FAW, the Football Association of Wales, has come in, is a Newport boy as well, and has really supercharged a process that was already happening, where we were playing much, much more attractive football. And it feels as though, we're now doing very well under him. So I think it's worked out well for both teams, but I have no doubt that Flynn will go on and do well for Walsall, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if they're in the promotion hunt next season.
Yeah, and because you've indirectly answered my question. My next question there was, do you think that Michael, I suppose, when you mentioned that at the start of the season he was blowing hot and cold, was James Rowberry, do you think that he was a big influence on maybe utilising Finn Azaz more often and in more advantageous positions to help him succeed? Is it hard to say because Michael Flynn was only there for so long?
No, I mean, I think that's true, but I wouldn't overstate it. I think, like I say, Flynn was trying to play a more attractive style of football, but he was very much evolution rather than revolution. And I think Rowberry just accelerated that process, and I think probably put a little bit more faith in Azaz and Cooper and Kane than perhaps Flynn had done. Flynn had been, trying to play them within his system, but not all three of them at once. And I think that was the difference. Perhaps, Azaz found himself playing with players of a similar skill set and a similar mindset, and I suspect that maybe helped a little bit. Although, because we talked on the pod about how those three midfielders, Azaz included, they were were they Flynn signings or were they signed by our director of football? And, we haven't quite bottomed out exactly whose decision it was. But I have no doubt that having seen the qualities that those players brought, we will be looking for the next Finn Azaz for next season. So if Villa have anyone else on their books who they want to send our way next year, then hopefully we've demonstrated that we will give them first team football and good training and an opportunity. So feel free to send us the next Finn Azaz.
And that's interesting because with the new regime, not even the Stephen Gerrard regime, but I think the new director of football that we have, or technical director, or whatever you want to call him, and along with our new academy set up over the last 3 years, we do tend to, like Swindon have been a big favourite to send people on loan to, obviously Ken Kester-Hayden, as we mentioned, Louis Barry, and they do tend to form kind of alliances with clubs to help with that. But so hopefully, as I say, that we would have you back on again to talk about people next season that we maybe have loaned to you guys. But I do have a selfish interest in Finn Azaz. Finn Azaz has the outside possibility of playing with Ireland as well. So as everybody knows, I am Irish and he is of Irish descent. That's where the Finn comes from, I would imagine. The Azaz is Israeli, but he was born in Westminster in England. So as I say, I might be seeing him suit up usually when players reach about 23, 24 that were born in the UK or born in England and realize I'm not going to get a sniff in that English team, then they usually come and play for us in Ireland. And you never know, might be able to have the inside track on Finn Azaz for my Irish mates whenever we're watching games, and if he was to decide to play for Ireland in the future. So really interesting. And thank you so much for your insight with regards to him. Is there any other kind of parting words that you would like to impart upon the Aston Villa fans about Finn Azaz?
No, I don't think so, except that, he, as I say, he's a player who was incredibly well thought of during his time here. I have no doubt he will be playing at a higher level next year. Whether he is quite ready yet to walk into a top flight team, I don't know. What I would hope Villa will do is give him a chance, perhaps in pre-season and maybe in some of those kind of minor cup competitions at the start of the season, and assess his quality, against opposition, both in friendly games and in cup games, and see whether he can do it, because he definitely deserves a chance to prove himself now. He's proved himself at our level with distinction. As you say, young player of the season. And even if ultimately perhaps he still maybe needs a year in the second tier somewhere, just to keep that development going, I'm sure he will continue to improve. But I hope that Villa do monitor him closely and give him a chance, because he's been great to watch, and he certainly leaves with all of our best wishes.
Excellent. That's lovely to hear. And if he does get a chance with Aston Villa, he'd immediately be our tallest midfielder at 6'1". So I'm screaming for a bit of height and a bit of bulk inside there. And at 6'1", he'd be immediately our tallest midfielder, which is quite crazy, I think, at times to think about, that we've got a midfield of not 6-footers, should I say. But maybe it's going to change over the next transfer window. Who knows? Ed, thank you so much for your time. Really, really appreciate it. It's been really enlightening to get to know about, as what I'm going to term him as, the forgotten man of Aston Villa's loan system this season, because we never even knew he was ours. Like, some people won't even know he was ours, and that's being really honest about it. It's really good to hear a glowing reference of somebody that the club obviously thinks very highly of. And as I say, I wish you all the best in the future. I hope that you do get promoted. Newport County, fantastic club, as you say, being run the right way with nice structures in there as well. And as I say, it will be, you never know, as I say, if Aston Villa do have people that go on loan there again, I'll be absolutely delighted to talk to you and get your insight on those too. But thank you so much for your time today. I really, really appreciate it.
Pleasure. Thanks very much.
Excellent. Thank you. So guys, thanks so much everybody for watching, for listening. As always, give this a thumbs up on YouTube. If you're not following us in the audio podcast, I really, really, really implore you to subscribe to the audio podcast. You don't even have to listen, just subscribe it. You never know, you might come across something you like. We will be doing a lot more audio based pieces over the course of the next 3 months until the Premier League does come back. So you don't want to miss out. You want to be subscribed to our audio podcast as well as YouTube. Really appreciate everything you do for the podcast, with your likes, your shares, your retweets, and if you continue to do that, I'd like you even more. So as I said, Ed, thank you so much for your time on the podcast today, and thank you very much for those insights. Thanks very much to everybody listening at home, and until then, all that's left to say is up the Villa.